from 2019. As usual, you have a terms and concepts memo available to help follow along in the lecture and in discussion. And if you have complicated questions or you don't want to speak in public, you can put questions on chat and I'll answer them. The idea of Hollywood is the most original idea Hollywood ever had, and the only one it made up itself. So in the end, Quentin Tarantino, the teenage movie geek, couldn't resist making a movie about making movies. To some extent, in Once Upon a Time, we see Tarantino's take on the situation we already saw last spring in Sunset Boulevard. Hollywood is turning its back on an aging star, Rick Dalton, played by Leo DiCaprio, who is desperate to stay in the limelight because his entire identity is wrapped up in being a star. It's the Norma Desmond rule. And this has-been star is accompanied by his stunt double, friend, and general helper, Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt, whose stuntman career net was always unimportant and is now in decline. Cliff pretty much parallels the Bill Holden role in Sunset Boulevard, the hanger-on. Rick Dalton had starred in a TV Western a decade ago, but wasn't able to transfer to becoming a major movie star, as Steve McQueen did from Wanted Dead or Alive TV series, and as Clint Eastwood most famously did from Rawhide, via Italian Westerns. Dalton is now reduced to guest appearances as a villain on TV. His career is fading. So one theme of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the heartlessness of the Hollywood system and the desperation of actors caught in the trap of advancing years and fickle audiences. It's Sunset Boulevard. A Hollywood paradox here is that making movies requires a big collaborative effort from many individuals. But at the same time, it's a project undertaken by ruthlessly competing individuals. Margaret Qualley got the crucial role of Pussycat in Once Upon a Time, which made her career. 25 other young female actors did not get that role. There's always fierce competition. There's always someone younger and very talented coming along. Everybody has talent. In the competition, Rick and Cliff are now losing out. Connected to their growing sense of irrelevance is that there's no slur delivered more bitterly by them both than hippie. This is accurate about certain old-line Hollywood stars in 1969, for instance, John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart. But Tarantino also sets up Cliff's and Rick's personal experiences in the film, so that those personal experiences bear out the aptness of their hostility. It's an anti-hippie movie. Cliff is so secure in his code of honor that he even resists the sexual offer of a luscious hippie girl hitchhiker because she's underage. But then she's also a member of the Manson family. And the Manson family are the only kinds of hippies we ever see in detail. At the end, Cliff and Rick slaughter them all. The savage Manson murders on Cielo Drive are a looming menace throughout the film. But I had a hippie girlfriend who once got picked up hitchhiking by Manson himself. She was taken up to the Big Bel Air mansion of Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, that's referred to in the movie, but instantly saw the problem and instantly got away. She's now a photographer in Manhattan Beach with a son who makes big money in Google and a daughter who's a doctor. That outcome would have offered a more rounded and accurate depiction of the counterculture than the Manson family. But Quentin Tarantino is not interested in serious sociological observations. Tarantino's focus is on drama and comedy. This movie is almost 3 hours long, really extraordinarily long. But the action is constricted to just 3 days in the lives of. The first part occurs on February 8th and 9th, 1969, and then it leaps ahead 6 months to August 8th, the night of the murders. I usually like to set out the plot so we're on the same page. So here's a brief summary. In February '69, Rick Dalton, the former Western TV star's fading career, he's appalled when his agent suggests working in spaghetti westerns in Italy. Rick's best friend, Cliff, is a decorated World War II veteran living in a trailer with his pit bull Candy. Cliff struggles to find stunt work because of a recent altercation he had with Bruce Lee, who he defeated in a altercation, and rumors that he'd murdered his wife. Rick Dalton would also love to befriend his neighbors, who happen to be Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. It would help his career. While fixing the TV antenna on Rick's roof, Cliff notes a scruffy hippie arriving at the Polanski residence. It's Charles Manson. He asks for music producer Terry Melcher, but is told Melcher has moved. He goes away angry. Later, Cliff gives a ride to beautiful hitchhiker Pussycat, a ride to Spawn Ranch, a former Western film set where Cliff once did stunt work himself, but which is now the home of the Manson family. Cliff's attracted to Pussycat, but he knows she's very underage. Cliff checks in with his old friend George Spahn, the ranch's senile owner, to make sure the hippies living there are not exploiting him. Cliff then beats up a ranch hippie for slashing his car tire, but he gets away safely. Meanwhile, during the filming of the TV Western series Lancer, Rick is struggling to deliver his lines. He's forgetting them. He's hungover. He's drunk, resulting in emotional breakdown in his trailer, a scene that actually is taken from an Orson Welles movie. But he recovers and gives a powerful performance. It comes from Citizen Kane when Kane is wrecking his room. But Rick recovers and gives a powerful performance, impressing even his very serious child co-star Trudy, and this boosts his confidence. Rick, his relationship with the charmingly serious Trudy is actually presented as a parallel to Cliff with the superficially charming Pussycat, but actually Trudy and Rick have a healthy relationship. Rick goes on to star in spaghetti westerns in Italy, and Cliff accompanies him. Rick makes 4 films in 6 months and marries an Italian starlet, Francesca. But before returning to the US, Rick tells Cliff that he can't afford his salary anymore and is letting him go. I wonder whether that was even true. Now that he's got Francesca, does he need Cliff? Returning to Los Angeles on the actual August 8th, 1969, Rick and Cliff go drinking to commemorate their time together. Returning to Rick's house, Cliff smokes an acid-laced cigarette given him by Pussycat, while Rick makes his usual large double margarita. Manson's followers arrive to murder the Tate house occupants. Hearing their car's loud muffler, an enraged Rick storms down the driveway and orders the group off the private street. The family members therefore decide to kill him instead. One has to say this, that they break in, they announce they're agents of Satan. Cliff knows them from Spawn Ranch and orders his pit bull to attack. Brandy bites off Tex's genitals, and Cliff then stomps him to death. Cliff is stabbed by a Manson girl, but he beats her to death too. And Brandy attacks the second Manson girl, who crashes into the backyard and startles Rick, who's drunk and totally unaware of the fighting going on inside the house. As the Manson girl attempts to shoot him, Rick retrieves a working stunt flamethrower from a shed and incinerates her with it. After the police take statements and an ambulance takes Cliff to the hospital, Sharon Tate invites Rick up to her house for a drink. Comedies have happy endings. It's what he always wanted. Here's a historical note, though. The scene where Rick ambles down his driveway and angrily tells the 4 Manson killers to go away, that seems ridiculous over the top. Who would ever do that? Well, the fact is somebody did. This actually happened with a neighbor of Sharon Tate on the night of the murders. After they'd slaughtered everybody, the Manson family killers stopped at the house of Rudolph Weber, just down Cielo Drive, because they saw a garden hose on his front lawn, and they decided to use it to wash the blood off of him. Rudolph Weber came out of his house and angrily shouted at them from the top of the lawn, "Get out of here." Well, Weber didn't like hippies. Amazingly, Weber survived. They left, and this incident is in the police files of the case. It's like the wood chipper in the Coen Brothers movie we saw last week, a ridiculous, over-the-top event, except it actually happened. Okay, so this is a movie about Westerns. Tarantino grew up doing his homework, watching TV Western shows. Uh, by Once in the Time in Hollywood, he'd already made two Westerns of his own, Django Unchained, his biggest hit, 2012, and The Hateful Eight, 2015. And Once Upon a Time is about the production of movie Westerns. It's all about the production of Westerns, past and present in Hollywood and then in Italy. It must have tickled Tarantino that the set that substituted our movie for the actual Spawn movie ranch, which is now just totally decrepit, the place where the Manson family really lived, in the movie is the Corriganville movie ranch. That's the same Corrigan movie ranch set where John Ford's great Western Fort Apache was filmed 70 years earlier. As a movie geek, Tarantino knows all about Fort Apache, and we're going to see it in our Dark Westerns course in the fall. So it must have tickled Tarantino that the Manson girls are living in the long one-story building that was the officers' quarters in John Ford's film. Even the title Tarantino uses for his film is taken from a great Western, Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. Again, another Italian Western. And of course, Tarantino feels perfectly free to craft a film where real people, Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski, Charles Manson, Bruce Lee, Steve McQueen, Mama Cass, are mixed in alongside his fictional characters. So Lancer, where Rick Dalton is having such problems in his guest appearance, that was a real TV Western show in 1969. Tarantino even feels free in Once Upon a Time to radically alter history. He'd done it already in Glorious Bastards in 2009, also with Brad Pitt, where Hitler dies in a burning movie theater in Paris in 1944. Hitler was also a big fan of movies. So in Once Upon a Time, the Manson gang goes to the wrong house and are annihilated, and Sharon Tate lives. So again, it's a happy ending. Once Upon a Time is often extremely violent, but also comically satirical about Hollywood and how Hollywood works. And most of all, it fulfills the narrative arc of comedy. That is, it starts out with very serious problems, Rick Dalton's and Cliff Booth's fading movie careers, and the looming menace of the Manson family over Sharon Tate, and then it solves all these problems with a happy ending. The annihilation of the Manson killers, Sharon Tate lives, and Rick's career is renewed. The film won the Golden Globe Award for Best Comedy of 2019. I think many people would find that shocking that it did, but it did. It's a comedy. Nevertheless, it's a comedy where there's a terrible crime at the heart of the film. That's what makes it a noir comedy. The crime is, of course, very famous, the savage murder of 5 people at the big house on Cielo Drive, including the very pregnant Sharon Tate and her baby, by the Manson family on August 8th, 1969. Joan Didion saw the Manson murders as the moment when Hollywood people began to live in real fear. A sense of menace builds throughout the film. The first time danger appears is when we see that Rick Dalton himself lives on Cielo Drive. The street sign suddenly looms up hugely and ominously from the right as Rick and Cliff drive around the sharp bend up to Rick's house. This comes immediately after we've seen the Manson family for the first time, dumpster diving for food and singing Never Say Never to Always, a very creepy Manson song. Rick Dalton, it turns out, is Sharon Tate's immediate neighbor. First time viewers of the film who don't know how it's going to end, but who know Sharon Tate's terrible fate, are often filled with a sense of dread from this moment on when the Cielo Drive sign appears. There's a lot of testimony about this. Here's an example. Quote, I vividly remembered the Sharon Tate murders. The first time I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I had to prepare myself all the way through the film emotionally for the Manson gang killing her. I really didn't want to watch it. In the second part of the film, this menace grows. It starts from the chilling sequence where Cliff Booth, led by the lovely hitchhiker Pussycat, visits the fallen down Westerns movie set where Manson and his disciples are living. These scenes, the heat and silence and bleakness of the place, and the creeps living there, are absolutely spooky. And it's a Western set. It looks like a Western, but I would also add that the creepy house at the top of the set looks and feels a lot like the house in Psycho. And there are scenes that are copied from Psycho as Cliff is walking up the stairway into the house. So the whole thing is a great exercise in suspense. Tarantino was clear what the suspense came from. We know in the audience something that Cliff doesn't know. We know the terrible violence of the Manson family. That means we know that Cliff could die right there in the middle of the film. After all, Tarantino killed off John Travolta right in the middle of Pulp Fiction. And we've been made to care about Cliff. Tarantino was aware of all of this. He chuckles that every time that he saw the film in a movie theater, the audience at this point, when Cliff is visiting the Mansons, the audience is always dead silent. The suspense of the audience knowing more than the protagonist knows goes back through Hitchcock to the ancient Greek theater. And Tarantino also knows that a real Hollywood stuntman, Donald Shorty Shea, was really murdered by the Manson family at the ranch in 1969. His body wasn't discovered until 1977. Tarantino has said, I am perfectly aware that in this sequence, Cliff could end up dead. But Cliff, behind his charm, is a very tough guy. In fact, a lethally violent guy. So he gets away from the Spahn Ranch set alive, even after beating up the Manson hippie who'd slashed a tire on his car. The hippie who slashed this tire is called Clem. There was a real Clem. The real Clem was the Manson murderer convicted of killing the stuntman, Shorty Shea. He beat him to death with a lead pipe. Tarantino says, in all my comedies, there's stuff you're not supposed to laugh at. Yeah, no kidding. But in the Spahn Ranch sequence, Tarantino again gets to replay history, so it comes out nice. Shorty Shea never got out of the ranch alive, but Cliff escaped. The dread keeps mounting when August 1969 itself rolls around. Sharon is shown packing a valise for her husband Roman as he goes off to London on a film project. That's where he was when the murder happened. By the time Sharon and her friends are shown going to a happy dinner at El Coyote, that's a real place, the Mexican restaurant where the group really ate on the evening of their murder, the tension is almost unbearable. One of the things he does is he's giving timestamps of when things are happening leading up to the murder. It says 6 p.m., 7:30 p.m. And behind it is playing the Rolling Stones song, dreadful song, Baby, Baby, You're Out of Time. It's masterful, but it's really chilling. And then uh, Tarantino explodes the film noir. The Manson killers go to the wrong house. Rick Dalton instead of Sharon Tate. And there, Cliff, a very dangerous man, kills most of them, and Rick Dalton kills one with a flamethrower. Here's the audience response. After all that buildup, when they walk into Brad Pitt's living room and he destroys everyone, that was great. God, that was fun. The angelic Sharon Tate is unaware of any of the slaughter going on, but after it's over, she invites Rick up to her house for a celebratory drink. And so Tarantino gives us a very satisfying ending. Uh, Rick gets what he wants, which is being part of the A list in Hollywood. Sharon Tate lives, um, and Cliff will live also. He's only partly wounded, minorly wounded. But the ending is a slaughterhouse ending, a satisfying slaughterhouse ending, which is typical of late Tarantino. Hitler and the Nazi bigwigs are burnt to death at the end of Inglourious Bastards. The Nazi generals are burnt to death at the end of the fictional Rick Dalton film. A dozen white racists and plantation owners are shot down at the end of Django Unchained, and the Manson family killers are destroyed at the end of Once Upon a Time. All these endings are satisfying to the audience because, in each case, as violent as they are, they're really violent, we know what the real evil people did. As we noted with Pulp Fiction, Tarantino, despite his bad boy image, is actually often kind to the feelings of his audience. He's kind to people's feelings about Cliff. He's kind to people's feelings about Sharon. He's actually old fashioned. And it's true that Tarantino is sort of kind, anyway, to Sharon Tate. He has sequences depicting Sharon going about her ordinary life, going to a party with her husband, happily showing her friend the nursery for the new baby. That actually comes with a timestamp also. Going to a movie to see a film she starred in and enjoying herself on the screen. It's really innocent egotism, not like Rick Dalton's fragile, savage egotism. He even shows her wearing her glasses, which she could never do in a movie. She's shown also to be a natural Democrat, cavorting happily in front of a poster for employees at the movie theater so they can get a special photograph of her. And the movie she's seeing is the mediocre Dean Martin vehicle, The Wrecking Crew, 1968, where Sharon Tate showed herself to be a great comic actress doing klutzy pratfalls, the only good thing in the movie. But Sharon is not watching a film where she's sexy. She's watching a film where she's a good comedian. Some critics said that Sharon Tate still comes off as an empty Barbie doll. There's something about the performance that is really plastic and you know, uncomfortable to me. I think there's something to it. But Margot Robbie's Sharon is also sunny, light, positive, in contrast to the depressed personalities of everyone else in the film. She's the only person who's happy. Tarantino says he was trying to rescue her from being simply the mythic victim. I'm not sure he actually succeeds in that. Of course, the film's happy ending, where she and her four friends in the house on Cielo Drive are saved, that is a complete fabrication. That's why the movie is called Once Upon a Time. The film is a fairy tale. Um, Actually, the Manson killers arriving at the wrong house because they're incompetent and crazy, this was the very first plot scene that came into Tarantino's mind. Everything else in the script started from, wow, they arrive at the wrong house. That would be cool. And he worked backwards from there. Let's talk then about Cliff Booth. Um, in the script, the movie belongs to Rick Dalton. It's about the arc of his career. But as it turns out in the movie as we see it belongs to Brad Pitt. The through-line narrative is about Rick Dalton, but Once Upon a Time is Brad Pitt's movie. Pitt won an Academy Award as Best Supporting Actor for his role as Cliff. Maybe the nomination should have been for Best Actor. Cliff is the most charismatic figure in the film, and he's more likable than DiCaprio's egocentric and fragile Rick. He dominates every scene he's in. Cliff's overall competence and his emotional reserve until it suddenly gets violent mark him out as a traditional hero of Hollywood westerns. One commentator said, "For men in the audience, Cliff Booth is the man they always wanted to be." That's something to think about. Cliff's a stuntman. An actor's duty is to depict an emotional arc for the audience to identify with. The duty of the stunt double is to step in and replace the actor at the point where the simulated action actually becomes dangerous. He's a much lesser paid subordinate who takes the real risks. Uh, Again, you can see that Rick Dalton is making a fake Western while Cliff is at the real Western scene up in the Spawn Ranch with the Manson family. After Tarantino imagined the Manson family arriving at the wrong house, that's the first thing that came into his head. The Cliff character was the very next thing arriving in his mind. This was because Tarantino had been impressed with several stuntmen he'd seen doing dangerous jobs in his film, not just stuntmen, stunt women also. In some ways, the film is an ode to these stunt people who are, they're not paid well, they don't get much credit. So no credit. Brad Pitt's Cliff had worked in Hollywood for 10 years, but all he has to show for it is a tiny trailer behind a drive-in movie theater in down-market Van Nuys next to a pumping oil well. Sharon Tate is a rising star. Rick Dalton is a fading star. Cliff Booth is a nobody. Cliff is quick to violence when provoked. Watch out for that ironic smile. It appears just before he explodes. He beats up Bruce Lee, the famous martial arts star. He punches out a Manson hippie at Spawn Ranch. He beats to death two more Manson killers at the climax. Yeah, I mean, especially he's smashing the head of one girl over and over again. We're told he's a World War II veteran of special operations. That is, he's a guerrilla fighter, a commando. Tarantino conceived of him as a Medal of Honor winner. A central moment in Cliff's history is that he killed his wife, Billie, with a spear gun while out on a boat near Catalina. We're shown part of this scene, but it's incomplete and we don't see what actually happened. So it's difficult to interpret. The death of Billy Booth frames our understanding of Cliff and frames the violent ending of the movie. One can interpret Billy's death as Cliff's spear gun accidentally going off, in the same vein as Vincent's gun accidentally goes off in Pulp Fiction, killing Marvin. Or one can see Cliff as an angry murderer. Which of the two possible interpretations of the spear gun incident a viewer takes, this informs the viewer's understanding of the rest of the film. That is, if one views Cliff as innocent, as most people do, then he's easy to like, and his fictional ultra-violent destruction of the Manson gang at the end of the film, thus saving the life of angelic Sharon Tate as well as many other people, simply marks nice guy Cliff's emergence as the hero he has always been throughout the movie. At the end, facing the Manson family, he's Gary Cooper all alone versus the Frank Miller gang at the climax of High Noon, another film we're going to see in the fall. Man's got to do what a man's got to do. However, if one views Cliff as a man who murdered his wife and somehow got away with it, then Cliff is not a real hero, just someone whose anger at the menacing arrival of the Manson gang sets off his own deep homicidal impulses. The death of Billy Booth is therefore a Rorschach test for the audience. The problem, or the genius, is that either reading is reasonable. If you listen closely to the movie, you'll hear a sudden large wave slap the boat just before the spear gun goes off. That does suggest it was an accident. But Tarantino wrote a novel uh, based on the screenplay 2 years later. And in Tarantino's novel, Cliff did kill his wife. In fact, Cliff is a darker character in that novel throughout. But then again, the novel is not the movie. The novel is a later Tarantino version of events, and it differs from the film in lots of ways. So, what we see in the film is what we see in the film. And maybe it's wrong to go with what he did later in the novel, or maybe it isn't. Another example, when the beautiful hippie hitchhiker Pussycat tries to seduce him, Cliff rejects her because she's way underage. Some reviewers took this as an example of Cliff's old-fashioned Western's code of honor, seen also in his loyalty to Rick, who doesn't deserve it. So he's a real Western's hero, man. No, I can't do that. You're too young. But what Cliff actually says to her is, prison's been chasing me all my life. I ain't gonna go to jail for a bit of poontang. That doesn't sound like a Westerner's old-fashioned code of chivalry. Again, it's a Rorschach test for the audience. Another historical note. In an exciting scene, Cliff roars out of Rick's driveway up in the hills, spinning his blue Carmen Ghia 3/4 around to Bob Singer's great song Rambling Man, blaring on the radio. Then he takes the dangerous Cielo Drive U-turn impossibly fast. What a guy. But we have a video documentary of the making of the film. And you can see Pitt, surrounded by a large film crew, trying to make the 3/4 turn around and failing, even at only 5 miles an hour. The crew pushes the car back up the driveway again and again, while Pitt sits in it miserably, much more Rick Dalton than Cliff Booth. What is real? Well, it's all Hollywood. For those folks who don't like the real Brad Pitt, this is a perfect example of why there's the reality of Pitt versus the movie. Now, about Rick Dalton, oh, Leo DiCaprio had been a beautifully boyish kid when he was young. But by 2018, he'd been in the movies for almost 30 years, and he was 45 years old. He'd already played a despicable, sadistic plantation owner in Tarantino's big hit Django Unchained. And unlike Cliff, DiCaprio's Rick has no redeeming virtues. Dissatisfied with being a mere star of TV westerns, Rick abandoned a hit show and tried for the big time, real Hollywood stardom, and failed because he didn't have the talent. He got aced out of The Great Escape by Steve McQueen, a scene we get to see. It's just he doesn't have enough acting ability and charisma for movie stardom standard. He made a few mediocre adventure films and was done. So, in some sense, Rick's story is the typical California noir story we talked about last spring. Initial success, followed by crushing failure. Beset with anxiety as his career has faded, Rick is increasingly unable to say convincing lines, even as a guest villain. He's on the edge of a nervous breakdown. Rick's been arrested for drunk driving so many times that his driver's license has been revoked. That's why Cliff has to drive him everywhere, because his driver's license has been revoked. Tarantino said that Rick's heavy drinking was a kind of self-medication for anxiety. His dinners up at his big house in the Hollywood Hills are big whiskey sours mixed with raw eggs and a huge beer stein. Under the pressures of Hollywood and under the pressures of Hollywood failure, Rick has become an alcoholic. Rick can be friendly with Cliff, But basically, he's so self-centered that he views Cliff as a servant and disposable. Going to Italy to make westerns and coming back, Rick flies first class while he sticks Cliff in coach. At the end, Rick's about to get rid of him, and it's painful to watch this relationship. Rick is initially horrified at the idea of starring in Italian westerns. I guess he's a lot like Mark Gordon when he's played in Real Thing, the Real Thing, that is American western. But his career is in the dumps, so he has to go. His career in Italian westerns is an undeserved success, and so is his undeserved emergence as a hero to the public when the Manson family attacks his house and they're all killed. As usual, he gets the credit, but it's Cliff who's done most of the work. DiCaprio was nominated for an Academy Award as Best Actor for his role as Rick, while Brad Pitt was only nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Cliff. Another example of Cliff Booth getting the shaft. Of course, one difference is that Pitt won. I want to talk about Margaret Qualley as Pussycat. Even a comedy noir can use a femme fatale, and in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Pussycat is it. This was Margaret Qualley's breakthrough role in Hollywood. She proved that there's no such thing as a small part. Even though she's only on the screen for 7 minutes, that's all she's there, her name appears alone as the fourth name in the opening credits of the film, and for good reason. Her character is a sexy, magnetic, and very young Manson girl. Tarantino conceived of her as only 15 years old. He says that Pussycat is based on a real person, namely Ruth Ann Morehouse. Hers is a shocking story. There's a real story. At 14, she was given to the Manson family by her own father, a fundamentalist preacher who thought that Charlie was the Christ. Manson immediately had sex with her. He assigned her the role of seductress recruiter, which we see her doing in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She often did this while hitchhiking, as we see in the film. Those who succumbed to Ruth Ann's charms included Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys and Terry Melcher, a record executive and manager of the great folk rock band The Byrds. Like Dennis Wilson, Terry Melcher became infatuated with her. But when Manson himself auditioned for Melcher with his guitar, Melcher didn't see enough talent there to merit a record contract. Manson was furious. He took revenge, sending his killers to take revenge at the Melcher house, which by accident was then being rented by Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. In Tarantino's novel, there's a lot more about the adventures of Pussycat than in the film. And in Tarantino's novel, Cliff is far more obsessed with her. In the car, she strips off her jeans to tempt him, and she's got no underwear on. But he still backs off because she's simply way underage. At the end of the Spawn Ranch sequence in the film, you get to see how vicious Pussycat can be. And that's the real Ruth Ann. The real Ruth Ann didn't take part in the Tate LaBianca murders, but like the Manson inner core, she carved an X on her forehead in support of Manson. And it's likely that she tried to poison one of the witnesses against Manson. At her audition for the role, Margaret Qualley sang I'll Never Say Never to Always, this very creepy Charles Manson song. That's Hollywood artifice combined with reality. It's really creepy. Qualley was very charismatic and very physical. The little jig she does when Cliff picks her up hitchhiking was her own improvisation. Tarantino kept it in the movie. Tarantino loved her, but to get the part, she had to do a screen test with Brad Pitt, since she'd be spending almost all her time on screen with Brad Pitt's Cliff Booth. They had to be sure, Tarantino did, that Margaret would not be intimidated by Pitt's glorious movie star presence. Um, and because Pussycat in the script is not intimidated by Cliff. On the contrary, she's used to intimidating men. But it turns out that Margaret Qualley had tremendous chemistry with Pitt, a great beauty herself, and the daughter of Andy McDowell, another great beauty. She wasn't intimidated. But driving to the set every day, yeah, she got the part, but Qualley would play a cassette of Manson songs that Tarantino had given her to listen to as she was driving to the set. Yeah, I can understand why he did it, but it's creepy. One of the memorable scenes in the film features Pussycat propping up her bare feet on the dashboard of Cliff's Cadillac after he picks her up hitchhiking. Pussycat's unkempt and barefoot appearance is an indication of the character's unkempt and wild nature. But Qualley was the real actor, was reluctant to do this sequence. She'd spent years in ballet training and was self-conscious about what she considered her ruined feet. She told Tarantino, I have weird feet. I was in pointe shoes far too long to show my toes to the world. But Tarantino convinced her to do the scene anyway. People say it satisfied his foot fetish. In that connection here's another example of the inexorable passage of time in Hollywood. Tarantino made something of a fetish of Uma Thurman's bare feet in Pulp Fiction, too. And in Once Upon a Time, one of the sexy barefoot Manson girls is Maya Hawke, who is Uma Thurman's daughter. That's right, because Once Upon a Time was actually made 25 years after Pulp Fiction, 1994 versus 2019. Oof. For that matter, Brad Pitt had been a terrific Achilles in Troy in 2004. Maybe we'll see that next spring. That was 15 years previous to this movie. Pitt was actually 55 when he made Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's a shock. And if the Cliff Booth character is 55 too, then Cliff Booth was born in 1914. And so for many viewers, including a Catholic bishop, Cliff exemplifies the traditional old-fashioned cowboy virtues: courage, loyalty, prudence, justice. Okay, we've already talked about Sharon Tate's depiction in the film. He presents her as sweet and wholesome, but again, I find something really plastic about the character. Maybe it's Margot Robbie. And Tarantino also props up her bare feet for us to see while she's watching the movie of herself. Well, he's the director. Now, about Manson. The Manson family's murderous invasions of 1969 are what give the film its narrative tension. And Manson's personal aura of threat hangs over the entire film. At one point, he actually sees Sharon Tate when he's gone up to the house, and she waves at him. It's really pretty creepy. But he only appears in one scene, and in that scene, he's so incompetent that he arrives at Cielo Drive for an audition, not even knowing that Terry Melcher hasn't lived there for months. Like so many other figures in Hollywood and in so many other figures in California noir, he wants to strike it rich and doesn't. In a scene cut from the film, he throws a tantrum when Cliff, up on the roof, ignores his friendly hello. But you know, it's the tantrum of a child. He's driving a battered Twinkies truck. This was all intentional on Tarantino's part to try to diminish his aura. Now, I don't think he succeeds. So we're coming to the end, and let me just talk about the reception of this film. It was a huge box office hit for Tarantino. It was expensive to make, even though both DiCaprio and Pitt, who had worked with Tarantino before, worked for much less money than they usually demanded in order to work with Tarantino. but it was still expensive to make. But it grossed $126 million in its first 5 weeks in US theaters and another $250 million in its first 9 weeks in Europe. It's the second highest grossing Tarantino film behind Django Unchained. In short, the public loved it. And we can ask in discussion, why did they love it? Why was this movie a success? But Once Upon a Time immediately got involved, I have to say, in the prevailing culture wars of 2019. Left-wing critics objected to what they took as Cliff Booth's old-fashioned white man cowboy stoicism and heroism. They thought it was dangerous to be depicted that way and called the film reactionary. They underlined the extreme violence with which the film ends, especially the violence in which the two Manson girls are killed at the end. One gets her head bashed in by Cliff, the other is burnt to death, asserting that the film revels in violence against women. Well, I'll only say that the two girls in the film are Sadie Atkins and Patricia Krenwinkel, the vicious real-life murderers of innocent Sharon Tate, her baby, and 3 other people. And also, Cliff doesn't stop with women. He kills Tex, too. Tex Watson, the other killer. Once this became a meme out on the net, conservative critics responded that the disdain of the woke critics for this film indicates how far removed they were from the tastes of the American public. The woke were accused of believing that movies for grown-ups should not be fun. Chortled one conservative, "This was the ending we've been waiting 50 years to see." In any case, American audiences loved the film, but that was also true in Europe. So we're not just dealing with American culture here. Once Upon a Time did even bigger box office in Europe than it did in the US. This too needs an explanation because what we're looking at is not just American culture or something specific to American culture. It was a bigger hit in Europe. It was a big hit in the United States, but it was an even bigger hit in Europe. It made twice as much money. The film was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. That's a huge number, including Best Picture, all the big ones, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Screenplay, Best Director. But it won only 2. One for Brad Pitt, one for production design, the recreation of 1969 Los Angeles, which was done without doing computer-generated graphics. But as happened to Pulp Fiction, the Tarantino film lost out for Best Picture in 2019 to a feel-good movie, Green Book, Green Book's hymn to racial reconciliation, a film nobody watches anymore. Well, that's Hollywood for you. Okay. So let's take a 5-minute break. I'll take a look at, see what's up in chat, and then we'll come back for discussion.
Great, Art. Thank you.
Okay. Pointing out something about our 4 films. Some Like It Hot was written by Billy Wilder and directed by him. Pulp Fiction was written by Tarantino and directed by him. Fargo was written by the Coen brothers and directed by Joel. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was written by Tarantino and directed by him. With these 4 films, what you're looking at is something that's actually very unusual in Hollywood, where usually the screenwriters are not the same as the directors. These are the full creative impact of people at work, that they're both the screenwriters and the directors. Bev wants to know, what, if anything, did Brad Pitt and Leo DiCaprio have to say about their roles in the film? DiCaprio, by this time, was used to playing villains for Tarantino. He'd read the script. There was only one script, by the way, because Tarantino was paranoid about the script getting out to the public. So there was only one script at his house, which by the time everybody had read it, it was stained with coffee stains and pizza sauce and things like that. And DiCaprio knew what he was getting into as Cliff did, as Pitt did with Cliff, and they agreed to work for less money than they usually did. Not that it was hugely less; they each got $10 million for the parts, but that was half what they usually demanded. They did it in order to work with Tarantino, and this was actually true with at least part of the reason that people went to see the film was Tarantino's reputation. There was an analytics company that did some work on this and found out that about 40% of people went to see Once Upon a Time because Tarantino was the director. Usually in those kinds of surveys, it's about 7% who go because of the director. So I think they were happy with their depictions, and of course, Pitt is making another movie based on a Tarantino script, The Further Adventures of Cliff Booth. You know, he's going to be 63, but you know, stars are stars. At least male stars are male stars. Um, and Shelley asked, this is not important, but I was puzzled about how Cliff walked away from with his dog to go home at the end, right before the murderers come. But then in the scene in Rick's house, when they're both there, I don't remember that. Did he walk away? Um,
Yeah, he
yeah,
was
well,
taking his dog away.
He was taking his dog for a walk, I think. I don't
yeah,
think he was going home because he has to drive to go home.
But
yeah.
then how did he get the food to feed the dog?
That was a good question. I
Well,
wonder.
he brought it.
I thought he was at home.
I guess he brought along a can of the dog food with him.
I guess so.
I guess no.
But
Yeah, I think they were just taking the dog for a walk. That's.
here's a, oh dear, there's someone at the door. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
I think he often brought the dog with him during his all-day stays hanging out in Hollywood
Yeah.
because it was probably better than leaving in that little trailer the whole time. So he
Yeah.
probably had food he brought along too.
Yeah.
And that dog won the Cannes Film Award for dogs that year. Acting award for dog.
Well, a lot of people like the dog.
Well, it's not a pit bull.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
Well, there were actually 3 dogs.
Is that so?
Yes. There was the dog that won the film acting award in Cannes, the cute one sitting on the sofa, and then there were the other 2 who were trained in controlled violence, and it was a company that ran that, and they did that to us.
Interesting.
It's all artificial.
Yes, that's all artificial.
I have another question, and if I could ask, because I have to leave. You said that Tarantino had a foot fetish, which was new to me. I mean, not that I follow Tarantino, but what I did notice when I was looking at it was there's so many pictures of people walking and their feet and their legs.
Yeah.
I thought was a very interesting cinematic or cinematographic thing, and I perhaps it is his foot fetish, but it seemed to, I don't know, more significant than that.
Some of it, the drama of this actually comes from Italian westerns. That was a thing that you would often see in Italian westerns. And he plays with it because even the child actress, the first time you see her boots, which are very beautiful boots, and then you see it's just a child. So he uses that for dramatic effect, but it's only the women who are barefoot. He never shows Cliff Booth's feet.
But he shows lots of people walking and with shoes in their legs, and often it starts at the feet and then moves up. Anyway, unfortunately, I have to go. Bye. Thank you.
Okay. Timmy, you want to comment
on this? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think Tarantino's the greatest director in the world, but the violence is always an issue. And as a woman, it's very hard for me. And there's something about the violence in some movies that seems real, and sometimes it seems cartoonish. And when it seems cartoonish, then I can deal with it. And my favorite movie of all time is Pulp Fiction. But this is very good, too. I wasn't even able to get into Django. There's this line that he has with the violence, and on my side of the line, it's okay because it's funny. My audience was just roaring during that torch scene where the woman got torched in the pool. That was very funny because our tension about whether Sharon Tate was going to get killed was now broken. And so we were free to laugh at something that was so violent and so awful if you think about it objectively. So I wonder what you think about that. That in some movies, like I saw that Jackie Brown after Pulp Fiction, that was horrible. And yet I thought Pulp Fiction was a total masterpiece. And I just don't know. Does he know the edge between violence that upsets people and violence that makes people laugh? What do you think about that?
Well, I've got contradictory feelings to you twice. I didn't think that the violence in this movie was comedic. I was shocked by the savagery with which Cliff Booth deals with the Manson people, and I didn't think. I'm sure people were roaring with relief when the second Manson girl is incinerated. But I didn't think that was funny either. I thought it was actually pretty horrific.
It is horrific, and also the castration, that was horrific too. I didn't know he actually succeeded in it, the dog.
Oh, wait, say that again?
Dog.
Well, you said that the dog castrated that bad guy.
Right, he did. Yeah.
Well, that's brutal and that's ugly, and I didn't even comprehend it after my second watching. I thought he just attacked him.
And on the other hand, Timmy, I really liked Jackie Brown. So,
oh, really? Well, it just was so violent in the beginning. I didn't continue with it. So, but there's this edge, like when Cliff was hitting the boy who made his tire flat.
Yeah, right.
Well, that I didn't enjoy it, but somehow it seemed like he deserved it. It seemed like the whole Manson group deserved it. And then you see him driving away in the car after that guy fixed the tire. So it seems maybe there's something about justified violence versus not justified violence.
I think this made left-wing critics very uneasy. He's saying that the violence was justified. The guy who Cliff beats up, he doesn't just hit him once.
Right, I know he practically kills him.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to say is, Tarantino was very much affected by Deliverance, and in Deliverance there was a rape scene against a man, and in it the rapers are saying "squeal like a pig," so that had some film noir qualities, and that's one scene affected so much of Tarantino's work.
Yeah.
And in some ways he's imitating that awful scene. I hated that scene. I thought it was awful.
Oh,
but he was only not.
It's in Pulp Fiction. He got to remake it in Pulp Fiction.
Right, he did it in Pulp Fiction. So I think there's something homoerotic about some of his films. And
that's true.
Art, Susan Hansey's put a chat on for you. Art, maybe take a look at that.
Say that again.
Susan Hansey has been waiting for a while with a chat.
Yeah. I had a discussion. I had a discussion.
Could I just finish?
Yes.
No, but we have to.
With before on this.
Can I finish the thought?
Oh, yes, sure.
I think the reason that Rick got rid of Cliff in the end is that he was feeling that homoeroticism and wanted to be with a woman and not, because Cliff was like the psychiatrist for
Yeah.
Rick. They were too close, you know. And they were drinking buddies. They were too close for a buddy. For, you know, in the westerns, they're never that close, and that happens over and over again in Tarantino. You have these. It happened in Pulp Fiction. You have these couples, two men. So I just think that. Anyway, thank you for your comments. I really appreciate it, but I'm still baffled about why some violence is more horrible than others. Thanks.
Well, we will come back to this issue of violence, and it connects with what Lou is saying. Somewhere I got the idea that comedy should be funny and make me laugh. Did I miss something in this movie? Well, I think part of the thing is, Lou, that people laughed sadistically at the fate of the Manson killers. People had huge enjoyment out of those scenes. I know that that's hard to accept, but that was sure true when I saw it in the theater. And even though watching it at home, I thought that the violence was horrific, but they loved those people being destroyed. They loved the dog castrating Tex. The other thing I want to say about Timmy, about when Cliff beats up Clem. Clem is the guy who actually killed Shorty Shea. That's a real character. And in the movie, what you get to see is Clem being beaten up by the stuntman instead of killing the stuntman. So there's a sense of justice being done in that way. But I think we got to go to Lou can respond, and then Dolores.
It was actually my comment about the.
Oh, Joan, it's your comment. Sorry, I had this discussion with Lou.
It was me, Susan, that made the comment about comedy. I found this true all the way through the series. I didn't find any of these films funny except for our first one, Some Like It Hot. Certainly there are parts of that were really funny. I think Marilyn Monroe is a genius. But I came at these films open-minded, but I came away disliking the violence so intensely and finding it very hard to call them comedy, no matter what you say about funny violence.
Well, I think part of the issue is people. I understand that position, and I think if you watch, especially if you by yourself and watch the climax, or for that matter, if you watch the climax of Django Unchained, which is also just a horrific slaughter, that you're not going to find it funny. But in Django, it's an explosion of relief when Django kills everybody. And in this film, it's an explosion of relief, of tension, when Cliff and Rick kill everybody. And the dog, too, being involved in it.
When you see flesh, though, floating off the body in the pool,
yeah,
pretty hard to laugh at that.
I thought it was hard to watch myself, but when I saw it in the theater, people just loved it. They just
really
loved this ending.
Okay,
that's worth considering. Why do you think they did?
I don't groupthink of some kind.
I think it's catharsis. It's like,
Stop it.
What is that, Jamie? Jamie, and then Lou and Joan. Jamie.
I think Dolores has had her hand up for a while too, but I had a comment earlier that I think got missed. I was really interested about Kurt Russell's inclusion in the movie. Yeah. And I ended up reading about how Tarantino used him as almost like the authenticator of the time, because he'd been acting in Hollywood during that time and ever since. I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was a interesting inclusion.
I think part of this might be about the authentication of using Kurt Russell. Is that his most famous role is as Wyatt Earp in Tombstone. and he comes with that aura. It doesn't go away because it was such a powerful performance. So it's and then what do you think of the fact that Kurt Russell actually doesn't like Cliff?
I thought that was very good.
Yeah, what do you make of that? He doesn't.
To me, Cliff and his dog are basically the same. So they're both incredibly controlled, very, very violent creatures.
Yeah.
And Cliff creates his dog almost in his own,
Yeah.
his own portrait.
Hmm.
But I really liked that Kurt Russell and his wife, his wife's character, that she
Right.
despised him.
Yes, she did.
I just thought they saw.
She thought he thought she killed Billy.
Right. But Kurt Russell also comments that there's a feeling that Cliff brings onto the set
Yeah.
he doesn't like. And so I
Creepy.
feel like he could see what Cliff really was that really no one else seemed to be able to do.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, actually, the scene on the boat, for people who know Hollywood history, this is about the death of Natalie Wood.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually, there's in the script, Billy has a sister named Natalie.
Mhm. Oh, I didn't know that.
So and so it's Robert Wagner. So they say. I mean, the horrible thing is that Natalie Wood always had a terrible fear of drowning all her life, and that's what happened. Dolores, you wanted to say more, and then
Yeah. So can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I totally disagree with you about Margot Robbie's Sharon Tate. I think that at the beginning, if you don't know that this is an alternative history, she plays a horrifying version. It's a very, very happy, flat, almost cartoonish character, like she's floating by and you know she's already dead in your mind. So for me, when I watched her, it was like, oh my God, this is horrible watching her smile and be so happy because she's going to die, and you don't know that. So I thought that was very effective, both of Margot Robbie and Quentin Tarantino. Cliff, I see as somebody as a violent killer with post-traumatic stress. I mean, they say that over and over again. I think he probably did kill his wife. They say he's creepy. He's very carefully controlled, and the reason he got Best Supporting Actor, I've read all his reviews, and the people who reviewed him said they've never seen him do, the actor, such a nice, carefully controlled portrayal of a person that was almost dual personality type. He could on a dime turn to someone extremely. He was almost as bad as Manson in his craziness, and at the other time he could just be. And I want to say that Tarantino has a habit of killing off people you like he killed off in most of those at the end, even in Django. He killed the really nice guy that basically trained Django. But Cliff lives. And there's another movie coming out fairly soon that was written by Tarantino, not directed by him. It's a continuation of Cliff's life.
Right.
And it comes out pretty soon.
This was an issue. I brought this up in connection with whether Brad Pitt liked working with Tarantino, like that.
Yes.
And the answer is he's doing another movie written by Tarantino.
Yes, he is. He's doing Cliff again.
I mean, I don't know whether people have seen Troy and as Achilles.
Yeah.
It's
a little bit of the same character, carefully controlled until suddenly bingo.
So suddenly bingo. That's right. And I think he plays that really well. The torch scene at the end was pure Hollywood, which I think explains why people were laughing. Because remember at the beginning, Leo says, "Oh yeah, I used this torch in one of my scenes," and he was describing and showing how he practiced with the torch and everything. And then he got it. And at the very end, after he killed, he's walking up there and being led into the Sharon Tate compound. And the guy goes, "Whoa, you killed him with a torch? Oh, like the prop used in blah, 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 blah." And it just makes it like even a film.
I think all of the audience reaction to that was a release of tension and actually hatred of what the Manson family did.
Probably.
Both conservatives hated it, but also counterculture people hated it because of what he made the counterculture look like. And
Sure.
so all of these
Sure.
people could say, God damn, he's getting what they deserve.
Well, like Inglorious Bastards, right? So Inglorious Bastards, they incinerated an entire movie house.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
This
and
is
everyone was
restrained, Dolores.
And that was like horribly violent. You know?
I think it was Lou and Joan and then Jim, I think.
Okay, well, I'd like to say a couple of things positive about the film before I become totally negative.
Okay.
I really waxed nostalgic over seeing all those classic cars and listening to some of the music and seeing the old theater marquees, you know. I mean, I was pretty young then at one time. But you know, I think that my problem is that I'm not an action film fan, and I like inner action rather than outer action. I like a story to hold things together. And for three-quarters of this film, it was like just a scrapbook, you know, like watching undisciplined improv or something like that, a scrapbook of old memories where this picture doesn't relate to that picture and so on. I didn't have a story. I felt that the film was misogynistic because all of the women just looked like bimbo Barbies, you know? There was no depth, with the one exception of Pussycat. I do think she really had bona fide character, and she showed it and acted it well. But for the rest of the girls, whoa. I felt that it might have been racial. The casting might have been racial. I don't know. Back in the 60s, were blacks uh, in very many Hollywood films? They were not. Well, there certainly weren't any then, and justifiably so.
That was realistic, actually.
All right, good for you.
Especially no technical people. No.
But you know, the self-indulgence of the director, I found offensive. It was just like watching the Sharon Tate character in the movie, watching herself. That was Tarantino watching himself. For me, I mean, she played his role. But
I thought that actually Sharon watching herself in the Wrecking Crew is actually charming. She's so happy to see her job.
Yeah.
And it's an innocent egotism.
Okay.
As opposed to Rick's.
I can actually see that point of view, but I certainly felt that the director was being self-indulgent and didn't really care so much about what the audience thought as what he was experiencing through reliving his memories.
Well, one of the things to think about with the idea of self-indulgence is that all four of these films are self-indulgent. The person who is the creator is both the screenwriter and the director. And it's a totally personal expression. It's not usually what happens in Hollywood. And I mean, most famously, Roman Polanski and Robert Towne in Chinatown just really hated each other. And Polanski changed the script, and as far as Towne was concerned, perverted it. So there's a whole bunch of other. So I mean, in terms of self-indulgent, nothing could be more self-indulgent than being the screenwriter and the director.
Truly.
Right.
Truly.
Yeah.
Well,
and
I just have one
novel and making money that way too, and saying, "Oh, here's another way I could have done it."
Yeah. Well, I just have one more thought on this, and I do think it is the bottom line in my viewing of this film, and what makes it so different, let's say, from Fargo.
Yeah.
This movie is very, very clever, but it lacks totally in warmth and heart. There's no depth to it. It's all on the surface. It's all action. and it's paper thin in its humanity.
We just disagree about that. I'm not saying that it's a great human document, but I think Cliff is a fascinating character and is presented in very complicated ways. He is sort of like Brandy the dog. I think that is tightly controlled because he's actually a maniac. Yeah, but I thought that worked great. I thought actually that Pitt should have won for Best Actor rather than Best Supporting Actor.
Yeah, definitely.
Jim, and then there's a comment by Kim that I want to respond to also on
Yeah, Art, thank you. I just want to expand on what you said about why people love this movie so much. And, I was in Los Angeles in '69 as a 17-year-old. This was the most horrific event
absolutely
we've ever had. And not only was it horrific at the moment, but I remember a certain sense of just fright existing in the community because of it. This could happen to anybody. And not only that, we've lived with it for the last 55 years as people try to get paroles, and it's in the news every once in a while. We continue to be reminded of it. And then in the movie, when I watched it the first time, you don't know what's going to happen. You think you're going to have to relive this again. And then at the end, you got to remember that they would have all been, if they hadn't acted, they would have been killed, right? So they had to act. They had to act. And I must say, it was a tremendous relief what happened to see it the first time for sure. And we certainly did think it was wonderful and great that the tables were turned. We know it's a fictional movie. It didn't really happen, but it was whatever words you used. I agreed with them that it was, yeah, it was. And watching it the second time, of course, I knew it was going to happen, so it didn't have the same impact. And I thought the scene with the flamethrower was actually fairly clever. They had
the scene with
the flamethrower where they introduced us to the flamethrower early in the movie, so you kind of figure it's coming back sometime.
It's all stolen from The Dirty Dozen, which was another film that Tarantino saw when he was a kid.
Yeah, right.
But I think it is catharsis in exactly the way that Aristotle said in 400 BC. That the purpose is that the tension that's been built up is relieved. And in this case, because the violence is sort of comic strip, it's relieved in a comic way, and people's psychic problems are relieved that way. I was there also in Los Angeles in '69, and I remember being horrified too. And part of it, until they arrested anybody, was you never knew whether the knock on the door was going to be them, whoever they were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let me go back to.
Lots of chats out there for you.
Yeah, there is. I got to go back up. Let me just see. Okay, Tarantino's, this is from Kim. Tarantino's movies are mesmerizing. I come from the theater, and the banter is so David Mamet. Also, there are so many current young, celebrated actors in this movie. That's right. This was his. These were his choices for casting, and it includes Margaret Qualley, Austin Butler, Mikey Madison, who won an Academy Award 6 years later, Maya Hawke, Dakota Fanning. This is one of the things I heard an old actor say. He was talking actually to one of the Coen brothers, and he said, you say go out and do the scene, and you don't really give us much direction. And Joel Coen says, if I've done the casting right, I don't need to do much direction. That it's all in the casting. But it is certainly a fact. I mean, Tarantino has made the careers, remade the careers in the case of Travolta, of so many people. And that indicates, golly, he's been a positive force for all of these, especially younger actors who have gone on to do things. It's true. And Timmy says, I think Tarantino was great and misogynistic. It, it is certainly the case in this movie. There isn't a positive woman unless you think that Kurt Russell's wife is meant to be positive because she can target Cliff for what Cliff is. And she's the only one who does it explicitly. Kurt Russell is sort of hinting around at it, but she is the one who does it. And of course, okay, so self-indulgent, yes, Timmy says. Wagner was self-indulgent in his operas also. It's a very self-indulgent film. It's all of Tarantino's interests that are thrown in. I think that's right. Yeah. And, this is very, yeah. So Timmy says, and I have to say, I liked Cliff also, but the way people are talking presents a much darker Cliff. And Tarantino understood that. In the novel, Cliff is a much darker character. In the novel, he does kill his wife, which is totally unclear in the movie. In the novel, he pursues Pussycat. He really wants her and only pulls out at the last moment. And only because it's just dangerous, because she's so young. So, and yet I thought it was a great performance. Jim.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay.
I forgot.
Then, yeah, we'll know more about Cliff in the next movie. Yeah, he has a mustache. I don't like that. It's not some sort of 1970s Pancho Villa mustache. But I think the thing when we think about these four films, one way to think of them, what holds them together is, in fact, that these are the total creations of a person who's both the screenwriter and the director. And I didn't realize when I chose these films that that's what it would be, but that's one of the things that links them together. Are they funny? I don't know. Sometimes they are, but I don't think that Tarantino was trying to make things very funny. He was being satiric about Hollywood. But he was also, I think actually he's compassionate in some ways, more compassionate than I would be towards Rick, who is simply at the end of his career. It's horrible to be a star and then to reach for the golden apple and miss it, which is what happens. Let's see, there's two new things. Although the impression shifted almost immediately, my first thought, this is Jamie, my first thought about Cliff and Rick's friendship, I thought Cliff lived at Rick's place initially, was to relate it to Cary Grant and Randolph Scott. Yeah, well, there is a homoerotic issue here which is not explored by Tarantino ever. But you can certainly see what the deal might be. Not that they could act it out or operate on it, but Cary Grant and Randolph Scott were roommates. So that's what that is about, yeah. And then Timmy says, yes, agree, catharsis. And then Timmy says, Tarantino liked Wagner. Wow. Boy, I hate Wagner. Okay, so that's really interesting. Dick.
I'd like to circle back to one of Lou's concepts, and that is bothersome to me. And it's just the separation between laughter, which performs a variety of functions and is not a response to being humorous. And to me, a lot of what is classified now as comedy is divorced from the concept of being humorous. And my self-definition of what's comedic to me has to involve something that touches my funny bone. And there has to be a preponderance of that kind of content as opposed to viciousness on the other side of the ledger for me to say, well, that was a comedy by my definition. There may be people laughing for various reasons that I do not find as a response to something funny. So that's just sort of how I'm parsing out the concept of comedy.
People, Dick, what do you make of the fact that in the climactic slaughter, people were laughing in the audience?
I would agree that there's a cathartic reaction that results in laughter, but I don't think it has to do with comedy.
Okay. Somebody wanted to know, did Tarantino actually have a stunt double? One of the, I'm sorry, that Cliff Booth Pitt have a stunt double. Do you folks remember that he was the star of Fight Club? So he insisted on doing his own stunts. So it really is him leaping onto the roof.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. And it really is him having the fight with the Bruce Lee character.
Wow.
I mean, that's right out of Fight Club. So that doesn't mean he isn't, as people were saying before we began, his relationship with Angelina Jolie was just terrible. And he can be, and what is a son of a bitch off stage. Joan.
I'd like to say something that nobody has said, and I think I'm going to sound absolutely crazy, but I feel like I've seen a bunch of these scenes before, and I don't think I've seen this film, and I don't think I've seen the films that he was referring to. But for example, where the Manson family was living, that ranch, I mean, I can visualize the whole thing, and the car and the steps and the house. And maybe he's just gotten into my nightmares or my dreams or something. But he told you I was an art critic. I'm very visual. So I almost don't trust my memory, because when I see these images, I think I've been here before. I've seen this before. And that's true of that drive going up. Is it Cielo Drive?
Yeah.
Quite a few of the images are just implanted, like I've seen this before. Who knows why?
I didn't know what Cielo Drive looked like, but I do think that maybe you have a sense memory of Psycho, because with the shots that are leading up to the house where George Spahn is, it's like that looming Victorian house in Psycho. And then there's a shot when he's walking up the stairs, which is one of the murders that occurs in Psycho, where somebody is walking up the stairs and suddenly out from the right comes the guy dressed as his mother to kill him. That these scenes struck me as just creepy because they recalled other scenes from other movies.
That's probably what it is.
Fascinating.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm never going to show Psycho. I'll say that.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else, please? We're about out of time. Anyone else? Hand up by Richard.
Dick. Yeah.
I think there was probably, speaking to Joan's memory, there's probably quite a bit of news reportage and filming that went into the follow-up of the murders. That's probably duplicated some of the scenes that reenacted, if you will.
Interesting.
I mean, I think it's the case that when it actually happened, there were lots of scenes of Spahn Ranch. So that might
be it.
Also, yeah.
Art, I'm thinking it may be time to sign off.
Okay.
But let me say, I think I can safely say this on behalf of everyone. Thank you for this wonderful series, your fourth series for us.
Absolutely.
I hope everybody realizes there's another one coming in October.
Yeah.
And we'll all meet again there, I believe. Art, thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank
Thanks,
you, Art.
This has been great fun.
Thank
Terrific.
So long, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.